for staying. Appreciate it. Any surfers here? Any sailors? You always check the tide before you go out, right? If it's incoming or outgoing, because it's going to matter. If you surf and it's outgoing, you might end up hitting some rocks, right? If the water's going out. So it'll affect your ride. And it's so true for real estate investors as well. We need to understand the economic tides because it will affect us. And we just need to be prepared. It doesn't mean you don't go out and surf. You just bring the right equipment and you're just more aware. So this is my disclaimer, super fancy. I got it from my attorney. These are my ideas. Don't sue me for them, okay? All right, always check with your advisors. So interpreting headlines. My background was in the news. I have a degree in broadcasting. I worked in a lot of news stations in San Francisco. And I understand headlines. Headlines are one thing. They're meant to get your attention, usually by scaring you, so that there's an audience, so that advertisers are happy, right? And we are motivated by fear. That's how we are. Rich talked about it in his talk, in his opening talk. So we always have to look deeper than the headline. Never believe the headline. I mean, unless you really trust and believe the news, because it is usually right? Just kidding. So as a former news reporter, when I got into real estate, I started to help some of the news agencies interpret the headlines because they're reporters, they're not real estate investors. So I ended up on a lot of news stations helping them understand, and also in magazines. And this is just an example in 2013. Even in this case, this wasn't a headline, I was asked to debate Robert Shiller of the Case-Shiller Index. So he tracks housing. And I was invited. I was terrified to do this live. But when I realized what the debate was, his side was it was a dangerous time to be investing or buying real estate. Now, you could probably have debated that, right? Anyone. I was like, oh yeah, get me up there. So I, of course, argued that it was the best time, the hugest wealth transfer ever. Everyone should be buying a house. And I don't know, who do you think won? San Francisco State or Yale University? Huh? San Francisco State. So even in this case, the metrics that he was looking at, he's not really necessary. I don't know if he's a real estate investor, but the metrics he was looking at was real estate doing this. What I was looking at was prices were cheap, cash flow was high, made complete sense, and only an upside. It couldn't see prices going down much further. So now we've got to really interpret today's headlines because there's a lot going on, but there's always a lot going on. So let's take a look at some of the headlines to interpret them to help us understand what we should do in 2022 and the years following. What we do know, or at least what we're hearing, is we have a fast-moving economy. U.S. economy grew at 5.7% in 2021, the fastest full-year clip since 1984. That's exciting. Low unemployment. I mean, this is amazing. I love this chart, and I usually go back to whenever they started the chart because I want to see it over the long term. I think it's really helpful. And this makes it really stand out, right? What we went through just 2 years ago. 22 million people losing their jobs, not being allowed to work. It was an incredible thing to be living through. And just 2 years later, 85% of those jobs back. And that's incredible. We're almost at pre-pandemic levels. But maybe we overshot. We've got too many jobs now. US job openings jumped to 11 million, and fewer workers voluntarily quitting. We've got stock market rallies. Who here thought the stock market would go higher after 2021? Anyone? A few of you. I'm not really a big stock person, but I surely thought it had hit its peak. And that was not true. Look at that. Rising home prices. Who thought prices would continue to rise in 2020? Some people. Not a lot of people, but some people. Home prices went up 16.9%. Some are saying now it's 19% or 20%. That's phenomenal, and that's an average. So there were areas like Boise, what was it, 50% or something increases? I mean, that's incredible. Anybody invest in Boise? Smart, lucky. I hope you did it before it went up 50%. Okay. Rising rents, I mean, come on, look at this chart. This is incredible. Congratulations to everyone who owns rental property, and I'm so sorry for anyone who's a renter. These are tough times for renters. A report just came out. I just did it on my Real Estate News podcast that for the first time in a while, I think it was 26 markets that are kind of major markets, it's cheaper to own than to rent because of this. Rents have gone up so much. Incredible. And again, in certain markets, even more than the national average, over 25% in Phoenix, Tampa not far behind it, Miami, Orlando, Las Vegas. This is across the country. This is not a one market thing. It's not like San Francisco where all of a sudden we discovered computers and the $99,000 property was $1 million. This is across the board. Some cities not seeing as much, but still decent rent growth. But you see San Francisco, Kansas City, San Jose on the lower end. So will new supply come in and solve this problem of just not enough housing that's driving the rents up? This new lot supply should tell you the answer to that. Can you look at that slide? That's incredible. New lot supply. Anybody got lots for sale? Anybody? I do. Talk to me if you want some. New listings dwindling. To interpret this slide, I know it's probably hard for some of you to see the numbers because it's far away, but that orange line is 2021. The purple line on the top is 2017, and then it goes down. 2017, you can see the active listings was somewhere around 1 million, 1.2 million, and went up to like 1.4 million. Look at it now in December. It's like, I can't really read it, but it's below 500,000. It's like a third of what it was. That's listings, available inventory. Again, I'm talking more on homes, but that affects multifamily, right? And gives you an idea of what's going on out there. We've got delays and price increases. Anybody in the building industry here? Renovating. Like, it's crazy, right? We have syndicated probably 7 subdivisions nationwide. And while we were really happy to see home prices rising, costs are rising even faster. So it's really hard to be a builder right now, and we're all in that in some way. Because if you're not trying to rehab or build stuff, you're paying higher prices, especially for new things. And this all comes at a time when we have the highest household formation from that yellow group, the millennials. And you see that big bump in the yellow group? that big bump is about 29, 30 years old today. Anybody know the typical first-time home buyer age? 32. Some will say 31, 32, 33. I think it's a little later for millennials. But yeah, that means that bump, that huge demographic of millennials who are, many of them in the tech industry, some of the most highly educated people ever, people who have more information in the palm of their hand than the government had when I was their age. Really. I mean, these are brilliant people, many with high salaries, and they are just coming in to home buying age at a time when you saw very little inventory is there. So what does this all add up to? We know inflation. Inflation has reached the highest level since 1982. Anybody had invested in 82 here? Oh, you're also young. Well, there was a lot of inflation in the 80s. And so as consumer prices jumped 7%. So as I talked about in the debate, the way that the Federal Reserve handles inflation, because a little inflation is okay. I mean, nobody wants to pay more for stuff, except investors. It helps investors. But it can be good for the economy and just slight. The Fed likes to see around 2%. Anything more than that starts to be overheated. We certainly don't want hyperinflation. That's not good for an economy. So the way the Fed regulates that is by raising rates or lowering rates. And when I say rates, I'm not talking mortgage rates. I'm talking the overnight lending that then can affect rates. So we know that the Federal Reserve is reversing the policy. And anytime that happens, that's a changing of the tides. And that's really when investors need to pay attention. If you know that the Fed is planning to lower rates, get ready. That probably means they're trying to stimulate. And that can be good for us, for investors. That usually means they're trying to make the economy grow. When they are raising rates, they're trying to slow it down. And that, again, is important for us to understand. It's a different environment. Still lots of opportunity, just a little bit of a different game. What we've seen in the past is that sometimes the Fed didn't get it right. In fact, a lot of times. A lot of times you can see these are rate hikes. And the rate hikes are, moving on up. Look at the 80s, just woo, massive, up in 15, I think it's like 18% there. And the lines that are going up and down, those are recessions. So you can see on a lot of these where the rate hikes are going up, and then a little bit after that, you see a recession. So in trying to slow down the economy, sometimes they overshot and a recession came after that. Now just 2018, at the end of 2018, you can see that the Fed dropped rates to near zero levels after the recession. And then looks like around 2016, started to raise them very slowly. And we have Jerome Powell as the Fed chief right now. And at least what we've seen in the past is he has tended to raise very slowly. So that's good. That's kind of, more comfortable for people. It was pretty slow. He did a little bit, and then, but by 2018, it got just to 2.5%. Really, not very much. That's still pretty good historically, right? But it was enough that we had to reverse. And does anybody remember when former President Trump, was fighting with the Fed? Anybody remember that? Right around 2018, there was just like this tweeting war. One of the tweeting wars of Jerome, you better, you're not going to have a recession on my dime, or whatever. I don't know what the tweets were, but somehow it worked, and they reversed and started to lower rates. And then, of course, when 2020 hit, went down to zero. But if you remember, is anybody in the home building business, or do you remember things slowed down a little bit in 2018 at that time? With our single-family home divisions, when we were selling homes, I'll tell you what, traffic just came to a stop for so many builders, and it was terrifying. So for whatever reason, these rate hikes do affect new homes. Maybe because new homes are more expensive, so when rates go up, it's harder. But all I know is I was on a lot of TV stations with this housing slump in 2018. And again, it was just a slight increase in rates. So for me, it's a little more concerning that there's rate hikes, because we're dealing with what everybody else is dealing with: higher labor costs, higher material costs. Can't even get the materials, and yet we're in contract with people and we can't get out of those contracts, so we're locked into a price. And now interest rates going up, so it's a little bit, I don't want to say concerning, but something for builders to be aware of. But also, if you're a flipper, if you're doing any big renovations on your properties, it can affect you, this inflation. So what is the Fed going to do? This is what everybody wants to know. And if you see the headlines, there's one problem. There's one problem. There are some Fed officials that want to raise rates really fast and really rapidly, like a lot, to slow down the inflation. Like I said, Jerome Powell hasn't done that in the past, so I'm not too worried about it. But there have been some Fed officials that want that. But this is a picture of the federal debt. Again, I'd love to show a span of, since 1960 to really get an idea of where we are. And you can see those little arrows. That is when our federal debt has doubled. That's the amount of time it took for the federal debt to double. So here we are. It's gone up quite a bit. The interest that our country has to pay on this debt is a lot. I don't have it in front of me, but it's like $500 million a month. Or I don't know. Don't quote me. Don't sue me. It's a lot, and it's hard to pay. It takes a lot of the budget. So raising rates too much is bad for the U.S. government, right? We don't want to spend all of the money on our interest payments, right? So these are some of the headlines we're seeing. Can our nation afford higher interest rates with the current debt? So it's a quandary that the Federal Reserve is in right now. They need to slow things down, but they can't. So a lot of people are in the camp of it's only going to be about 1%. So that might mean if it's 3 rate hikes, and again, don't quote me on it, I don't know, but this is what I'm hearing some experts say, is that even though there's threats of 7 hikes, what might really happen is 3, and maybe they're just 0.25%, maybe 0.5%, but maybe not getting over that 1% where it's 0 now. And at 1%, then if things slow down, they can kind of lower rates. It gives them a little ammunition. So what does that mean? Again, some people who I listen to, I have the Real Well show, and I have the amazing opportunity to interview people with far more experience and far more knowledge and education than I have. So I just get all kinds of perspectives. But some of the people that I really respect have said, this is the solution. This is the solution. There's taxes, there's no way. We could tax everybody 100% of all of your income and still not pay off this debt. Like, it's too big. It's too big of a beast. So that leaves money printing. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you couldn't pay your credit cards, if you could just turn on the money machine at home and pay them with that? That's what we're doing. This is something, I was just talking to Jeremy Roll in the back, and he's like, yeah, well, that's what Japan has been doing for a while. And if you want to get an idea of how it works, maybe just take a look at how it's worked for Japan. This is a chart. This is the M1. I think most economists look at the M2 money supply, but this chart is of the money supply. It's a really easy, quick Google. If you just type FRED for the Federal Reserve and money supply, you'll see the M1 and the M2. And that's basically money printed and in circulation. And that's fascinating, isn't it? Does that freak you out a little? That's a little scary. This is unprecedented. This is unprecedented. So for anyone to tell you they know what the impact is going to be, they don't know, because we've never been here. Okay? I don't mean to freak you out. I'm just saying we don't know. And in times of uncertainty, in my opinion, you want some certainty. And whatever that is for you, and that's what I'll be talking about in a bit. But what we do know, and this is what I was saying in the debate, there's a lot of people taking a lot of credit for their incredible investing savvy. And I got to tell you, if you invested in 2020, it was an incredible last few years. Like, you made money, hopefully. But I want to say, a lot of that was because of this. Where do you think we would be today if we didn't have this? We would have either a lot of people dead, right? Because we would have or we shut down the economy and a lot of businesses go out of business and a lot of people starve. I mean, it was a tough time, right? This was the option. So I'm not sure that we needed to do this much printing, but really the economy is booming because of this stimulus. And this is a whole lot of stimulus. This is throwing it all in. What we know from the past is that inflation isn't new, right? So we've kind of adjusted ourselves to inflation. And as real estate investors, we benefit a lot, right? We benefit. Real estate is one of the best things to be in an inflationary environment, especially when what? When you leverage. Especially when you're borrowing money at low interest payments in an inflationary market. The debt gets less. It gets kind of, the dollar basically is being devalued. So the debt becomes kind of less painful as the value goes up. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity for real estate and stocks. But you can see on this chart, there was really a shift. It seemed like inflation was pretty steady. And then 1971, it seems to kind of gotten unleashed. Who knows what happened in 1971? President Nixon took us off the gold standard. So there was a time when money was more than paper or a digital, like a button on the computer. It had to be tied to gold. And we just wanted more money than we had gold, right? Why be stuck with something like that? Let's have more money. It's better for politicians. They can make more promises and give us the things we want and get reelected. So we were taken off the gold standard in 1971, and the US dollar became it didn't happen then, but the US dollar is the world's currency. It's like the world's gold. Now, that's an incredible position to be in. So we are really lucky as a country and very blessed, and we need to understand why. I mean, we have a lot of wonderful things going for us, but financially, it has a lot to do with being the world's currency, right? So again, we need to understand that and hopefully never lose it, never lose that honor. And that would take some fiscal, I guess, responsibility. All right, but I'll go back to that slide. So what we know about inflation is when we were taken off the gold standard and it became easier to print money, that seems to be when inflation took off. So it does seem to go hand in hand. What we don't know is how such a massive amount of inflation, of money printing will affect inflation. Some people are saying it will actually do the opposite. There's a lot of theories, and the fact is we haven't been here, so we don't know. But what we do know is it's been a perfect storm, because like I said, inflation combined with low interest rates, amazing, amazing. And I know many people here have created massive wealth as a result of that. Look at those interest rates. So at a time when we've seen that kind of inflation, we've seen these historically low interest rates. When we hear that they're going up, it's still great. It's still great. But again, the tides are changing. We know that at least the Fed is saying that there's going to be monetary tightening, not stimulus, but tightening, even though we kind of know behind the scenes they're still printing money. Because all you have to do is look at that M1 or M2 and you see it's still going up. So, they're solving the problem that way. So bottom line, we're in uncharted territory, and what do you do when you're in uncharted territory? I'll just really quickly say our story. Rich and I bought in Dallas, Texas in 2006, 2005 too, and we bought in the Path of Progress where there's job growth, population growth, bought super cheap. These homes were like $140,000 in Rockwall, Texas. We bought like 10 of them, 12, I don't know. And then the Great Recession hit. So we technically bought at the peak, but those properties didn't lose very much in value, and they stayed rented because we bought in really good locations, and they were really good properties, and they stayed rented. In fact, the rents went up. So even when we were in the worst housing crash since the Great Depression, those properties really did well, as a lot of people did. I know certain other asset classes didn't do as well, but we found that the really desirable stuff did. So again, what we learned, cash flow is king. I know you know that, but it's easy to get speculative in this crazy wild market. But just remember, cash flow is king. You need money to cover the costs of things. Go back. Cash reserves, so vital, so vital. Make sure if you're syndicating, make sure that you raise extra money for the what ifs. You don't know what things are going to cost. You don't know what labor is going to cost or materials. You don't know if we're going to get shut down again. We don't know anything at this point. What we know is that we don't know. So keep your cash reserves, for sure, plenty. And you can raise more in the syndication. If you don't use it, you give it back. Don't over leverage. I just had someone hand me a proposal where it was a construction project and 85% financing. Like, no way. That's really high in this unknown time. No way. In fact, in a lot of our construction deals, we took no financing. We just raised enough to buy the land and build a few houses, sell those, use the profit to go on, or sell certain lots to pay for it, just to be safe. So be very careful of over leveraging in times of uncertainty. Oh, I keep doing that. Another thing, and I don't think this is going to be a problem, but I've been through it, financing can disappear. We went through a time when you could be on a project and have a construction loan, everything's approved, and the next day the bank has failed, and your loan is, your money's gone. There were equity lines that just disappeared, and I'm not freaking you out, and I don't think that's going to happen, but just make sure that if you're doing a project, you have your financing lined up. And if you're in a short-term project where you're really going to need, it's a short-term deal and you need financing in the end, make sure you've got that figured out and you've got a backup plan. For example, we're building a new house and I'm getting a construction to perm loan so that it automatically turns into a long-term loan rather than just be stuck with a balloon note in a year. And then the right market. The right market matters. We have a lot of political issues going on. We've got an election year on top of everything. And what we've learned is certain markets are more friendly to investors than others. That's been around for a long time. We know that there is job and population growth in certain areas that's much stronger than others. So we want to pay attention to that and make sure you're in the right market. And most importantly, invest in what matters most. It can get really easy to get addicted to this business. It's fun, right? Real estate is addictive. But sit down and really determine what's your end goal and why are you doing it? Is it to have more time with your kids? Then do that. Make sure you've carved that in and really invest in what matters most. So thank you. I wish you the best in 2022, and I hope to see you around and next year.